Welcome back, friends. It was a busy week of tournaments last week with lots of data to go through, so let's not waste any time and sit back, relax, and let's get right to it. And before we get started, we'll do the old YouTube pleasantries. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like. It really helps push it out there for more people to see. And if you really like the video, don't forget to subscribe. It helps support me, support the channel, and make sure you get all the latest videos. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. As I mentioned, it was a busy week last week, and we had over 1,200 players, and for the data slate, we're sitting at just over 6,200. For the games played, there was just over 6,800, and for the data slate, we're sitting at just under 32,000, and we had 23 tournaments last week, bringing the total for the data slate up to 109. So I changed up the layout, so the charts are a little bit bigger now, and hopefully a little bit easier to see, especially if you're on your phone. So if you guys like this new format, or if you have any more suggestions, just leave them down in the comments so I can help make these videos better for you guys. All right, and the first thing we're going to look at is the win percentage by army. So looking at the top here, the top 5, we have Genestealer Cults at 56, Deathwatch 55, Demons 55, Imperial Knights 54, and Tyranids at 52. And a little special shout out to Sisters who at 51, which is nice to see after many weeks of struggling. Down at the bottom, we have Imperial Agents at 20, Mechanicus 36, Thousand Sons 43, Drukhari 44, and then Militarum, Templars, Grey Knights, Space Wolves, and Tau all at 45%. So a couple things to note here. Genestealers had a pretty good week, 56%. They've been doing pretty good lately the last few weeks. Deathwatch at 55, I think is pretty good. You know, for an army that's just one detachment, they're holding their own there. Imperial Knights, it's nice to see them up there with a 54%. They had a pretty good week for win percentage and for tournaments, and we'll get into that a little bit later. As I mentioned, Sisters, nice to see them pull it at 51%. And then down kind of around the middle there, we have Space Marines, Orcs, and Necrons, all at 46%. Space Marines took a bit of a hit this week, not running the show as they have tournament wins-wise, and the win percentage kind of reflects that, a little bit lower than normal. Necrons definitely down. They're usually up near the top, so they had a rough week. I don't know if that's because of Aeldari is causing any problems for them, but they definitely dropped a little bit this week. Aeldari with their new codex at 51%, which I think is pretty good. You don't want to see them flying in doing 60s and up. You don't want a broken codex, because then that just leads to nerfs and, you know, feels bad for everybody. So it's nice to see them right around average, which should hopefully lead to a good consistent playstyle throughout the rest of the edition. Moving on, we have army representation. So this is a percentage of the players that play each army. The average, if everyone played all the armies equally, would be about 3.7%. So you can get a good look at the top here. Aeldari actually dethroned Space Marines for the first time in a long time. Space Marines are number 2. Aeldari had 7.4%, and Space Marines were at 6.9%. Necrons at 6.4%, and Demons at 6.2%. Down the bottom, Agents 0.01. They only had a couple players. Templars 0.09, Sisters 1%, and Thousand Sons 1.7%. They were all the ones down at the bottom. Not surprising for Sisters and Templars. They've been struggling mightily the last few weeks. You know, it reflects in their player count. Sisters did have a good week this week, but there was only like 12 or 13 players. So if a couple of them did pretty good, it will kind of prop the averages up. Demons, their army reps up pretty high again, still feeding off the Legion of Excess success. Necrons always near the top. Space Marines, like I said, they were over 8% the last few weeks, but with the Aeldari Codex, they definitely sucked up some of the Space Marine players who had maybe been waiting for one of their other armies to become viable. So, and you see that all the players are funneling into Aeldari, who are now at the top. So overall, it's still more of a have and have-nots. The majority of the player base is in the top 10, and you'd like to see it balance out a little bit. We kind of just swapping one leader for another, but overall, it's not the most balanced, but it's not the worst. You're always going to have a few armies doing great, and you're always going to have a few armies who don't have a lot of players. So hopefully, when some of these balance changes come out in the next data slate, we can sort of balance this out a little bit. All right, the next chart up is all three of the win rates, XOX1 percentage, and representation combined. Just a reminder, the XOX1 percentage is the percentage of players who played an army who went undefeated or only one loss at a tournament. So it's just a little bit of a way to gauge how successful each army is. The higher the number, sort of the better players did on average, getting up to the top of the tournament. They might not have won a tournament or gotten to the end game, but they were at the top tables. At the top, we have Demons, Knights, and Aeldari. So the way I organized this chart is I combined all the stats together. The one that goes the farthest over sort of had the best overall stats combined. So Demons with their 55%, 22% XOX1, and a 6% rep. They've had the highest stats combined. So they definitely had a very good week. They had a lot of representation, really good win rate, and really good XOX1 percentage. Same as Knights. They almost mimicked Demons except for the army rep, which is about half. And Aeldari is about the same as Knights, and they kind of make up for the win percentage with the higher representation. Down at the bottom, Agents, rough week, 20%. They had 0 and 0 basically. Mechanicus, 36%, 10 and 2. And then Drukhari at 44, 8, and basically 2% representation. So overall, if you combine all their stats, you do have a majority of the armies sitting in that nice middle bracket of 5 to 22 roughly. Anywhere from Deathwatch down to, say, Thousand Sons is not that far off. This kind of takes into account multiple different statistics and kind of balances armies against all those combined. Whereas one army might have a really high win percentage, but might have really low rep. So all these things give you a better feel of how they're doing as a whole. And you can take a look at some of the standout armies for XOX1. They're all kind of near the top, which is not surprising. 22 for Demons, 23 for Knights, 21 for Aeldari. Chaos Space Marines had 21s. So that means 1 in 5 players for those armies went undefeated or only had 1 loss, which is pretty good. The average is usually around 13 to 14%. Overall, when you account for all the different statistics, it's kind of balanced. That's why you kind of have to look at everything together, because win percentage tells one story, rep tells another story, but putting them all together gives you more of a whole feel for how things are looking right now. All right, and we're going to move on to the tournament wins for each army last week. So at the top, Chaos Space Marines had a big week with 4 wins. Demons had a big week with 4 wins. And Aeldari, their new codex really paying off with 4 wins as well. Leagues of Votann, big surprise at 3 wins. They went from having none to 3, so that's nice to see. Necrons pulled out 2. And for the first time, Space Marines are kind of down at the bottom with 1. And then we had Orcs, Imperial Knights got a win, which is good to see. Deathwatch got a win. Chaos Knights got a win, which is nice to see. And Guard had 1 win. Overall, it was kind of surprising. We had some new people at the top and some old favorites like Demons. They've been up there consistently. Chaos Space Marines come and go depending on the week. And Aeldari and Votann, definitely some new players at the top. Aeldari being propped up by that new codex, which is proving to be quite powerful and getting some tournament wins. And I'm not sure where the Votann wins came from all of a sudden, but it's nice to see. And moving on, this is the tournament wins for last week broken down by each subfaction. So this just gives you kind of an idea of how each army is getting those wins. So obviously Votann they only have 2 subfactions and nobody plays the other one. So Oathband got all 3 wins. For Demons, 3 of the 4 wins came with Legion of Excess, not surprising. Necron, Star Shatter, not surprising. Everyone's playing that detachment. Aeldari did have some of their wins broken up. So 2 were from the Devoted of Yenid. And then we had some broken down into the Aspect Host and the War Host. And actually, interesting enough, Chaos Space Marine, all 4 of their wins came from different detachments, which is nice to see. Chaos Cults, Creations of Bile, Packbound Zealots, and Renegade Raiders. So it's nice to see when one army has so many different detachments who are winning, as opposed to, say, the Demons, which are all coming from one. So there's clearly a problem with Legion of Excess. Whereas Chaos Space Marines, it's better when the wealth is spread around. You got a more balanced codex. Okay, and now we're going to move on to the win percentage by army for this current data slate. So this is stretching back 9 weeks since the data slate dropped, and everything's looking okay, actually. At the top, you have Deathwatch, 54, almost 55%. Demons at 53, Necrons 52, Knights 51, and Custodes at 51. And down at the bottom, rounding out the bottom, you got Black Templars at 41, Mechanicus at 43, Chaos Knights at 44, Sisters at 44, and Eaters at 45. Deathwatch still remaining on top for an army that was dead and brought back to life with a single detachment. They are doing very well. Demons, not surprising, on the back of the Legion of Excess at 53%. Knights up there at 51, which is nice to see. They're kind of up and down, so it's nice to see them having some sustained success here. Space Marines, for all their wins, are still below 50% win rate, but they are kind of dragged down by the new players and all that comes with being the poster child of the game. So they're never going to have top win percentage just due to the player count and the people who play them on average. So, 48% is still really good for Space Marines. Aeldari, 47.7. Theirs is kind of climbing. I expect to see that a little bit higher before the next data slate. Based off the codex results so far. And at the bottom, Sisters, they climbed a little bit this week. They're still struggling. Chaos Knights are doing pretty poorly as well. Canicus has been a rough spot all Dataslate, and same as Black Templars, 40%. Like, they're in a real bad spot. And I know I see in the comments every week, Templars and sister players are lamenting the state of their army, and I don't blame them. I feel bad for them. It's been a while. They definitely need some love down there. And this is the army representation for the Dataslate. So same as before, the average is 3.7. So you can see Space Marines for this entire Dataslate have sort of run the show, almost 8%. Necrons is 6.6. Astra Militarum 5.8, Custodes 5.7, and Tyranids at 5.4. And then down at the bottom, you have Imperial Agents at 0.2, Deathwatch at 1.4, Sisters 1.5, Templars 1.6, and Drukhari at 1.7. It definitely sort of mimics the win percentages. Most of the armies at the bottom of the win percentages have very low representation, Deathwatch being the outlier, but that's just because they're one single detachment, and they're always going to have a low representation, same as Agents. And then you have armies at the top who don't have a great win percentage, but are always very popular, like Space Marines and Orcs. They're usually down around, as a whole, usually 45 to 48%, just due to the players who play them. They're a very popular faction, so they're played by a lot of people. They're not played by the hyper competitive players all the time, so it does drag their representation down. But and then you look at Aeldari. As much as they struggled before the Codex release, they're still at 4.7, always popular. Tau 4.1 is nice to see. Worldies at 3.9 is also just slightly above average, which is a little bit surprising based on how they've been this entire Dataslate. They've had a rough go of it. But overall, it's kind of mimicking the chart from week to week. A majority of the players are in the top, but it's a little bit more balanced when you look at the whole thing combined. But you'd like to see a little flattening of those curves, so you bring the bottom up again, but you're always going to have those outliers at the bottom, like Deathwatch, Agents, Drukhari. They're just not extremely popular armies, versus like Necrons, Space Marines, Tyranids, Guard. They're always going to be popular, even if they're bad. So overall, this is looking pretty good. And this is the tournament wins broken down week by week. So the number on top is the total wins for each army, and each color in the bar represents a different week and how many tournaments they won that week. So as you can see, Space Marines at top with 13, but their lead was much greater. But you can see Demons last week got 4 wins, and it bumped them way up to 12, kind of catching up. Necrons at 9, Space Marines at 9, Astra Militarum at 8, and then Orcs and Aeldari both at 7. And you can see Aeldari is really making gains in the last little bit here since their Codex drop, where Orcs had all their wins mostly early on. And then you have the middle grounds at 4, 3, and 2. A couple armies down at the 1s, and then you still have 3 armies without wins. Not surprising, based off of everything we've talked about already. Adeptus Mechanicus, Black Templars, and Sisters of Battle all with none. So other thing to note is Leagues of Votan. They kind of jumped from 0 up to the middle of the pack with 3. So we'll see if that success continues throughout the weeks to come. See if they can pull in any more tournament wins. Overall, it's not as balanced as you like, but it's getting a little bit more balanced. We're seeing a few more armies pick up wins here and there, and hopefully we're getting closer and closer to every army having a win. But it's going to take a lot to get Mechanicus, Templars, and Sisters a win before the next Dataslate drops, I think. Okay, and the first faction focus for the week is Imperial Knights. So they had a tournament win this week and a pretty good win percentage. So I thought I would take a look at how they're doing. Again, I changed the format for this so the chart should be a little bit bigger and easier to read, hopefully. So overall, in the last 5 weeks, you can see their army representation is kind of all over the place, anywhere from 1.9 up to 6.1. But on average, I live in those mid-3s, which is right where you want to be. Same as the win percentage, 53, 59, then all the way down to 44. But overall, the win percentage is probably right around 50, just a little bit above, which is, again, just where you want to be. Take a look at the subfaction, the player base. Everyone's playing Noble Lance. No one is playing that new Questor Forgepack from Grotmas. No one really cares for that one. Same as the win percentage. Questor Forgepack does have a 61% win rate, but it's such a small percentage of players. It might only be 1 or 2 people who brought it, so you can't really look into that data too much. You need a bigger sample size. And then Noble Lance still has a 52% win rate, which is good to see. The ranks, they're pretty much, for representation, right in the middle of the board. Win percentage, they're 4th. XOX1, they're 6th. And tournament wins, they're 8th. So overall, they're doing very well. If you look at their meta health rating, they're at 106.9. So it's just above average. And if you look at all of their numbers in the chart below, with their ratings versus the meta average, they're pretty much on par with everybody. So right now, Imperial Knights are about as balanced as you can get. They're in a really good spot, and hopefully they don't screw with them too much in the next data slate. Or if they do, they adjust based off of other changes they make. Keep them right where they need to be. And the other side of things is the Chaos Knights. So these guys are telling a little bit different tale. They're not doing quite as good as their Imperial brothers. Looking at the last 5 weeks, their army representation is about a percentage lower than Imperial Knights, which is probably on par. More people probably play the Imperial Knights. Win percentages hasn't peaked over 50% in the last 8 weeks, so again, definitely struggling a little bit more. If you look down at their Subfaction player count, Trader Lance 82%. We did have a few people finally take the new Grotmas detachment, but still only 18% of players, and their win percentage kind of reflects that. Even Trader Lance is 44%, and the Iconoclast Fiefdom is only 33%. So people are trying to bring it, but it's really not working out for them. So I think that's why you're not really seeing it too much. And their ranks, they're kind of the opposite tale. While their players and rep is kind of just on the lower end of average, their win percentage, XOX1, and tournament wins are all near the bottom, not surprisingly. Taking a look at their meta health rating, it's 78, and that is reflective of all their stats. So you can take a quick look at that and go, okay, they're performing well below average across all major categories. So when you take a look down, win percentage, they're 4 points below average. Army rep 1, XOX1 is 5, and tournament wins are 2 below the average. So they're definitely struggling. Where the Knights are in a really healthy spot, the Chaos Knights definitely need some help and being brought back up. It does go to speak with the Knights competitive list is basically spam War Dogs or until you can't spam War Dogs anymore, and no one really brings the big Knights. And you know, for a Knight army, you want a little bit more balance. It doesn't really play the way you would expect a Knight army to play, so hopefully they can do a little balancing and get people to want to bring those big Knights to the table, bring a little bit more choice to the army for competitive wise. Okay, and that's it for the week, guys. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like. It really helps support me and get that video out there for more people to see. If you really liked it, don't forget to subscribe so you get all the latest videos I post. I appreciate all your support, and I'll see you next week.